Greetings ladies and gentlemen, I'm GC Smith and welcome to day 4 of the official Eldritch Moon spoiler season. We've got a lot of cards to get through today, so let's get right to it with Ingenious Scarb. 2 and a blue for a 2/3 zombie horror creature at common with prowess, and for a single blue, Ingenious Scarb gets +1/-1 into end of turn. I absolutely love this card for limited as it's a huge threat if it goes unblocked, which means your opponent always wants to block, which makes bluffing so much easier in limited. The fact that its 2 abilities synergize so well together, every time you trigger prowess allowing you to activate its other ability another time, makes this incredibly powerful. Limited all-star for days. Next up we have Haunted Dead, 3 and a black for a 2/2 zombie creature at uncommon with whenever Haunted Dead enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying into play, and for 1 and a black, discard 2 cards, return Haunted Dead from your graveyard to your battlefield tapped. This is going to be an absolute power in limited. It's just such a powerful card with the fact that it gives 2 bodies, one of which with evasion, just for 4 mana. The fact that the first body can return over and over again while giving you spirits each time. Yeah, sure, it costs 2 additional cards each time you want to do that, but sometimes you just draw a flood of land, and a card like this really helps you push through in limited. Great for the zombie deck for days. Next up we have Soul Separator, 3 mana for an artifact at rare with 5 mana tap and sacrifice, exile target creature from your graveyard. Then you put a token copy of the battlefield that's a copy of that card, except that it's a 1/1 spirit with flying in addition to his other types. Put a black zombie creature onto the battlefield with the power equal to the exiled creature's power and toughness equal to the exiled creature's toughness. This is a really fun, flavorful card that strips a soul from the body to create a soul that flies away with all the skills and stuff of the original person, and a minus zombie drone for you to control. This is a really sweet card, I think, for Commander, where you have a lot of cards with enter battlefield effects, but more importantly, it's probably going to be a really sweet card to go in the Trees Cadecophobia deck, combining really well with Tree of Perdition, because you don't care about its toughness being that high. In fact, you want its toughness to be as low as possible sometimes when you activate this ability. The fact that at 1 toughness, or even at 13, Triskaidekaphobia still kills your opponent because you just choose the mode which loses them a life and they die, makes this card all the more powerful. And the fact that it can be activated at instant speed is great as well, because then your tree is on the field for a very limited time before it dies again. Absolutely love this card. Next up we have Elder Deep Fiend, 8 mana for 5/6 Eldrazi Octopus at rare. It has Flash and Emerge for 5 blue, and when you cast Elder Deep Fiend, tap up to 4 target permanents. This is a really sweet limited bomb. Anything with Flash normally is, and the fact that you can cast it by sacrificing one of your cheaper creatures from early in the game makes it all the more better, because it means you're more likely to be able to cast this even if you don't hit 8 mana. A card that's this impactful that you can cast a lot easier in limited is always going to be powerful. That's the one negative thing about picking up all these expensive bombs. If an aggro deck exists in the format, or just an opponent's deck is quicker than you, you could be left with these cards dead in your hand, so it's a real shame to draft these and never get to use them. So Emerge seems to be a really sweet mechanic on this. The fact that it also acts as a combat trick, then giving you a 5/6 attack on the crackback is again huge. Love this card in limited. Not sure it'll do too much in constructed though. I mean, it depends how good Emerge ends up being and how good this card ends up being, but I can imagine there will be situations where you wish you had this. Not that I'm saying it's good enough to play, it's just a really sweet card. Next up we have Kecak Prowler, a single green mana for a 2/1 werewolf horror creature at uncommon. It also has the ability to pay 4 and a green to transform Kecak Prowler, and it transforms into Sinuous Predator. Sinuous Predator can't be blocked by more than 1 creature and is a 4/4 Eldrazi werewolf. This is a really cool card for the werewolf deck in limited. A cheap aggressive creature that helps you push through damage early game. It stops your opponent's werewolves decks transforming as easily as you want, and while it doesn't have the traditional when you don't cast a spell werewolf trigger card, that is in some ways better. It synergizes really well with all the werewolf cards from Shadows over Innistrad, but doesn't punish you for wanting to cast other spells in your turn anyway, and doesn't necessarily force your opponents to cast spells in their turn, which is a downside, but it doesn't punish you either. The fact that you get to just transform it when you have a spare 5 mana into a really hard to block creature is always good. Always nice to see a creature just gets more powerful as the game goes on. You'll have werewolf and Eldrazi synergies, which may be relevant in this format, who knows. Then we have a Vildian Pack Outcast. 4 and a red for a 4/4 werewolf horror at common, not uncommon, common, with trample, and for a single red, it gets +1/-1 into end of turn. And for 5 red, you transform it into Drone Pack Kindred. It turns into an Eldrazi werewolf that's a 5/7 with trample, and for single mana, gets +1/+0 until end of turn. I really like the flavour of this card. It's a huge beater for 5 mana, as if it goes unblocked, or even if it goes blocked, it deals a lot of damage to its opponent. Sure, if it gets blocked, it's more likely to die if you try and deal damage to your opponent, but that's always going to happen anyway. The fact that it transforms, it gets a better version of fire breathing. It goes from a more aetherling blue effect to, I guess, ghost fire breathing, because it requires a generic mana. I don't know. It's still a good card in limited. It's not necessarily going to be a first pick, but it definitely goes well into your werewolf deck. Next up we have Smouldering Werewolf. 2 red for a 3/2 werewolf horror at uncommon, and when Smouldering Werewolf enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each of up to 2 target creatures. That's actually a really nice ability to help clear the way of all those pesky 1/1 spirits, all those pesky early 1 toughness creatures that have seen play on 1/2, turns 1, 2 or 3. It helps clear the way and gives you a decent sized blocker. This is a really sweet card to see. And for 4 red, you transform Smouldering Werewolf into Erupting Dreadwolf. A 7/4 Eldrazi werewolf. It has, whenever Dreadwolf attacks, it deals 2 damage to target creature or player. So it goes from being able to clear the way when you play it, to transform into something that just pings your opponent whenever it attacks. That's a really sweet card. The fact that it can make it really hard for opponent's creatures to block, because it can string up to an 8 toughness creature, is really good as well. Next up we have Voldar Pariah. 3 black for a 3/3 vampire horror creature with flying, and sacrifice 3 other creatures, transform Voldar Pariah. It also has madness for black. It transforms into Abolisher of Bloodlines. Abolisher of Bloodlines is a 6/5 Eldrazi vampire with flying, and when this creature transforms into Abolisher of Bloodlines, target opponent sacrifices 3 creatures. This is really good in certain matchups in limited, and it might even see some play in formats like Constructed up against, high removal decks. The fact that you can sacrifice 3 other creatures to make your opponent sacrifice 3 creatures is incredibly powerful. It's a lot more powerful as well if your opponent doesn't have many creatures but uses a card like Gideon. I'm not sure if this will see play in Standard, but it's definitely powerful in Limited, and its really cheap madness cost, even at triple black, makes this card a lot more playable. Mono black or heavy black vampires makes this card super playable, and I would expect this card to be tested if it doesn't see a lot of play. Next up we have Strom Condemned. Let's pronounce that properly. Black for a 2/2 vampire horror at rare. Discard a card, and vampires you control get +1/+1 into end of turn, but you can only activate this ability once per turn. This is a really sweet card. Vampires have needed a 2/2 for a while now, and this might really help the vampire deck go all the way it needs. The fact that it temporarily turns into a vampire lord as well is incredibly powerful, while also enabling all of your madness. That's such a sweet card, especially since discarding card is part of the cost. The card you discard will get casted before this ability resolves, allowing you to discard a hasty vampire into play, so that vampire still gets the +1/+1 ability. Never miss that synergy. This is a really powerful vampire, and I fully expect this to see Standard play. Next up we have Harmless Offering. 2 and a red for a sorcery at rare, with target opponent gains control of target permanent you control. Red to donate. Yes, please. Might I add, though, that Donate is a card that Mark Rosewater himself said in 2014 during a rhyme that he would, or in the method of rhyme, said he would never print Donate again because it was a mistake. This card is super powerful, and against some decks will wreck them completely, especially while we still have that 4 mana black enchantment in play in the format, with the option of you must pick one, and one of them says you lose the game. This is the kind of card where you really just want to give your opponent the enchantment and just hope that you don't get duress, transgress the mind, or countered before you get to do it. Otherwise, you lose the game. I fully expect there to be a Grixis donation deck that works around that combo some point in Standard, because I would love to see that happen at an event above F&M. It's quite sweet to know we will have 2 janky combo decks in the format at once, which is again really, really sweet. Next up we have Decimator of Provinces. 10 generic mana for a 7/7 Eldrazi Boar at Mythic Rare, with Emerge 6 green green green. When you cast Decimator of Provinces, creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain trample until end of turn. It also has haste and trample. Why, hello there, Crater Hoof Behemoth. Sure, it's not really a Crater Hoof Behemoth by itself. I mean, Crater Hoof Behemoth gives bigger bonuses to your entire board when it comes into play, but this is still an absolutely sweet card, and the fact that you can cast it in Standard, well, I mean, you were never going to get Crater Hoof Behemoth in Standard anytime soon again, not after we saw what that one did. Especially not with one of the other cards I'm about to show you today, because that and Crater Hoof Behemoth would be far too powerful for the format. Especially with Elves, it's still here, and the enchantment that allows you to tap your creatures for mana. Yeah, that would be far too silly. Next up we have Wharf Infiltrator, 1 in the blue for a 1/1 human horror creature at rare with Skulk, and whenever Wharf Infiltrator deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. And whenever you discard a creature card, you may pay 2. If you do, put a 3/2 colourless Eldrazi horror creature token onto the battlefield. I really like this card, and I know a few people are saying it's unplayable, but I really do think this creature will slot into the blue-black zombie deck that really needed another 2-drop. Part of me thinks that actually this was tested as a zombie horror at some point, but they found it just too powerful with all of its abilities to be a zombie. The fact that you could theoretically bring this back with the other 2-drop, I think makes this far too powerful if it was a zombie, so I'm quite happy to see this as a human creature, especially since that means you could probably run it in the human deck as well. Next up we have Gaia Reach Sanitarium, a legendary land at rare with tap to add a colourless mana to your pool, and for 2 and tap, each player draws a card then discards a card. This is going to see tons of play in any Madness deck that sees play, which may or may not mean it will see play, who knows. Madness hasn't really quite panned out the way people wanted it to, and so I'm uncertain on the playability of this card. Definitely a sweet card though, and I definitely think they'll see a lot of play. So we come to the final spoiler of today so far. Hopefully any other spoilers we get today will obviously be talked about tomorrow. But boy, this one is insanely powerful, and I think ridiculously powerful considering what power white and green have already had this format. 1 green green for a sorcery, it's Eldrich Evolution. It's rare, and it has the, what it does is, as an additional cost to cast Eldritch Evolution, sacrifice a creature. Now on that alone, can you think of any familiar card, maybe reprinted in Eternal Masters recently, that has very similar beginning additional cost? Yes, Natural Order, and it does something very similar. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less, where X is 2 plus the sacrificed creature's converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library, and you exile Eldritch Evolution. So it does exile itself, which is something familiar to us that have seen these kind of effects come and go, or reprints of old effects generally do now exile themselves, especially if it's a very powerful spell effect. But boy am I surprised to see this as a playable card in Standard, let alone giving it access to Modern, which is insane. I personally am really excited by this card in one half to be able to build like a really janky combo deck or a really gimmicky deck or just a synergistic deck. But I'm also sad on the other side where you know that this is going to just slot into green-white tokens or green-white Bant just for days, because being able to sack any of their tokens to get a Sylvan Advocate is silly. I don't know. I don't really like the fact that they're giving too much power to green and white, but I do love this card, and I definitely think it will see great play in Standard and Modern. So that's all the spoilers we have for today. Hopefully I got through them quick enough for you guys. They're very good cards, and a lot of them, while we do have a few limited janky cards as well. Hopefully we're going to start seeing some more control cards soon, and hopefully we also get Planeswalkers soon. Why, my goodness, I can't believe we're at the end, nearly at the end of the first week and still no Planeswalker. That's really surprising for me. We also haven't got a card for that really interesting card they keep talking about in on one of the videos they posted up at one point on the Mondays. There was that card leaping down on us, and I don't think we've seen that card at all yet. So we can't wait to see that if they keep talking about it as being something good. So yes, that's the videos for today. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye.